Hi everyone, thank you for listening today. And just before we go to the episode, I wanted to let you know that on our website, thegreatcoachespodcast.com, we have some tools that you might find useful. One of them is our leadership diagnostic, which allows you to compare your leadership style with that of the great coaches. It's free, only takes a few minutes, and hopefully gives you some insight into your areas of strength and opportunity. Now, just a few words from our sponsors, and we'll start the podcast.
Business is booming, but you know what really helped? Xero, the accounting platform for small businesses. I used to think unpaid bills were just part of it. Ugh. But batch payments? Wow. Automated accounts payable? Even better. All in one place. That's a big one. And I can keep track from my phone while I get the job done. No bills in sight. What a life. Do right by yourself and your business and search Xero for your free trial. Conditions apply.
Finding ways to be financially savvy is a smart move. And knowing you could be saving money for the things you really want, like that dream home or new ride, is a great feeling. That's why the State Farm Personal Price Plan can help you save when you choose to bundle home and auto. Bundling, just another way to save with the Personal Price Plan. Prices are based on rating plans that vary by state. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability, amount of discounts and savings, and eligibility vary by state.
Welcome to the Lessons from the Great Coaches podcast.
I've learned that you don't do it alone.
You learn so many different things from so many different coaches.
That's an elite learning environment.
Failure is not a problem. How you deal with it is a problem.
How to be resilient.
How important it is to infuse joy in the process of learning.
To be a good coach, you've got to give more than you take.
What an interesting life it is to be a leader.
Hello and welcome to the Great Coaches podcast, where we believe that there is no algorithm for leadership, and so we interview great sports coaches from around the world to try and find one or two ideas to help all of us be better leaders. Why sports coaches? Well, because we believe they possess the type of leadership skills that leave a long-term impact on people's lives. Today's episode is on leadership, and I'm joined for the discussion by two great coaches. The first is Mike Dunlap. Mike is a basketball coach who has led teams in US colleges, the NBA, and in Australia. He was also an assistant with the Milwaukee Bucks when they defeated the Phoenix Suns to win their first NBA championship in 2021. The second is Rugby Union coach Franco Smith. As a player, Franco represented South Africa, as well as playing for clubs in Italy, France, Wales, and South Africa. As a coach, he has led teams to national championships in Italy and South Africa, and is presently the head coach of the Glasgow Warriors. And just before we go to the interview, today's podcast is brought to you by the Macquarie University Business School's MBA program. Designed to empower, challenge, and transform, the Macquarie MBA gives you the business skills and knowledge you need to succeed in an evolving global economy. To find out more, search for Macquarie University Business School's MBA. And now, please enjoy our episode on leadership.
You're listening to the Lessons from the Great Coaches podcast.
Well, very special episode of the Great Coaches podcast this morning. I've got two great coaches with me, and we're going to talk about leadership. I'd like to start by introducing the first of them. So, Franco Smith, good morning in Australia, good evening where you are, and welcome. Could you tell us where you are in the world and what you've been up to so far today?
Morning, Paul and Mike. I'm in Scotland. I'm in Glasgow. It's 8 o'clock at night here, just after 8 o'clock in the evening here, so a completely different timeline, I suppose, than the rest of you. But I'm the head coach of the Glasgow Warriors that plays in the URC Championship and in the European Cup Championship. And I'm a proud father of 3. So that is what I'm currently doing here.
Thank you, Franco. And of course, the guest, we've had him on a couple of times, and by popular demand, Mr. Mike Dunlap is back.
I'm the head coach at Colorado Mesa University by way of Antarctica, and I am pleased to be above the earth and a happy boy. And, but actually in a previous lifetime, I've coached in the NBA. I've coached overseas in Australia in the NBL, the National Basketball League. I've coached Division 1, 2, and 3 in college. And so I've covered a lot of bases, and also have gone overseas and done quite a few clinics and whatnot, and also been an active participant as a student and gone anywhere and everywhere to learn sport and teaching and methodology. And so without further ado, happy to be here with the topic of leadership.
Thank you, Mike. I did get a great message from you yesterday with a link to a wonderful article, which we may talk about later on as well. But I'm going to start by, let's start at a really high level before we drill down. Both of you have worked with some quite amazing leaders. Rassie Erasmus on one side, Mr. Michael Jordan on the other, and there's been many more, I'm sure. But Franco, could I start with you by just asking you, what is it you think these great leaders that you've experienced, what do they do differently that sets them apart?
Oh, look, I think they absolutely follow their beliefs. They embark on a journey and they like perspective more than perception, and they take that route on. Having worked with some leaders that are so determined to reach their end goal, sometimes they don't even care what type of route they follow, and they are so determined to get to that objective. They can't help engaging other people and dragging them on the way to success. So I think the first thing for me that stands out is character above personality. It's people that are prepared to adapt their personality to be successful, and that adds a lot of determination. In the process, they follow to get to that. So I think being task-driven and detail-driven is some of the aspects that I've noticed from the leaders that I worked with.
Thank you, Franco. And Mike, from your perspective, how do you answer that question?
I think that what they do is, if you look closely, is that there's been something that's been abject in their life, meaning loss of father, adversity, maybe some other things that direct correlation to their family. It was difficult, or they got cut, or some common denominator of adversity is opportunity. And then the other thing is that somebody within that journey when they were young gave them a hand up and helped elevate them, or at least instruct them, or upset them and motivate them, like Michael Jordan's Hall of Fame. He had to clear the air getting cut in the 9th grade. And in his own way, he thanked those people because he had a chip on his shoulder. But again, taking adversity and turning it into opportunity. And the subpoints would be work ethic, incredible work ethic, always a one more. In this generation, there's a young, now he's not so young, but David Goggins, that kind of drive, internal drive, intrinsic drive to succeed. Second is quid pro quo, sacrifice free time in order to ply their trade. And even with discouraging things happening, they were willing to go one more time, get the job done, and unbelievable determination. 3 is handle outside influences. There's some negativity and also some people that said you can't do it. And then you dig a little bit deeper, and all of them have the same story. Yes, they could. And then finally, how they're going to handle discouragement. Along the trail, it happens, and that ended up being a magic potion. They drank it, they were able to handle the criticism, and they got it done in spite of.
It's a wonderful example, and I think there's something in there about delayed gratification. I'd like to ask you both about what you stand for as a leader. But before I do that, I'd like to preface the question with a short video from the Australian cricket coach, who I'm sure you both know, Justin Langer.
A family, an office, a business, great leadership. And I know we're talking about that now, but leadership is the essence of all this working. And what great leaders do, one, is they're very clear on the path the team or the family is taking. They know what they don't compromise on. And I would say it's an exercise for anyone listening as well. As a leader, you should be able to write on a little napkin exactly what you stand for. You often hear in business people talk about, you should be able to describe in a couple of sentences what your business is about.
So I'd like to ask you both, Franco first if I could, what is it that you stand for as a leader?
Look, I stand for, to live, first of all, to be able to learn every day, to embrace love, to embrace other people, to create a culture in which you can love them, basically. Well, with love is obviously the rugby word, different word, but it's love, and to be able to leave a legacy, something that people can remember afterwards. Everything existed before us and everything will exist after us. For a short time, we're part of everything, and we must give everything to leave everything in a better place for the people after us. So that's a long story, but the determination in having an outcome, but in the end, growing the person rather than the player is for me more important. So I stand to give directive and not prescriptive, and trying to get people to become the best version of themselves by leaving those footprints, to live fully, to give everything you got to become the best version of yourself, to love, to care about everybody else. And we talk about an I care environment, to be able to learn every day, to accept sometimes when you are wrong, but to keep on learning, and to leave something behind, a little legacy. Maybe legacy can be interpreted a little bit wrong as an arrogant part, but to leave a legacy, to leave something else, something that somebody else can build on, and is concrete enough that it will change the future for people that believe in the same values.
Mike, I'd like to come to you in a minute, but Franco, if I could just ask a follow-up question. Mike talked about, when he was talking about great leaders, he talked about events in their life that have gone on and shaped their philosophy. As you think back, how has your stance on leadership, as Justin Langer said, your one-pager on leadership, what are the key parts that have evolved as you have gone on and learned and experienced life?
I think the main thing is that, I feel that I've been blessed with a gift. I'm Christian, so I coach from that perspective. I've been blessed with a gift to influence other people's life, and that rugby is my vehicle to change that person's life. And for the best, because the values that we stand for is obviously life-determining lessons, something they can carry with them beyond the game of rugby, beyond being an athlete at the top of the sport. So I felt that with this gift, and the gift includes my own success as a player, it opened doors for me so that I can reach people and they can listen through the success that I've had to direct them in becoming their best. And that is more or less how I use this vehicle of mine to influence them so they become good fathers for their children. The success part of that is only part of the journey and not the ultimate outcome.
You're not the first coach that described their role to me as almost like a ministry. In fact, I've heard a couple of coaches in America, Felicia Leggett, Jack and Natasha Adair, refer to it in those terms. But Mike, if I could ask you, what is it that you stand for as a leader? Or rather, what is it you hope you stand for as a leader?
Excellence. And the journey of excellence, like leadership, is not for everyone. It's lonely. And when you make tough decisions, you have to understand is that you're going to upset some people because your standards are high, be it character, be it performance-based, be it quid pro quo, the sacrifice of time is the ultimate statement of excellence. Also, to have a plan and to work your plan and always have a plan B. You have to be nimble in the fact that not all plans are workable and unpredictables happen. But the most powerful thing you can do is lead by example. You're going to have to be the first one in the facility and the last one to leave. And if you expect anything different, then you're going to get a different result. And so that means your family is going to sacrifice, and your friends and the people around you will not understand that many times you're going to have to drop and go. and you're not going to be able to vacation. You're not going to be able to do a lot of things that other people are going to do. And if you're not willing to make that commitment, then you're not going to drink from the cup of a world champion. You're not going to be excellent in a performance-based sport. And if you're in the NBA, you're dealing genetically with the best athletes in the entire world in the smallest operational space, 94 by 50. And you're literally taking people that are 7'6" and weigh 300 pounds and have 5.2% body fat. I don't care if it's soccer. I don't care if it's football. I don't care what it is genetically. You are taking a supreme athlete and putting him in a tiny space, and then they have a jersey and shorts. So you're able to get on top of them and see the emotions, et cetera, and the physicality of what they can do, whether it's a 48-inch vertical and they're 6'10", and their arms are 7'6". So my point is, genetically, when you're dealing with people like that, and you're saying that we want to be a champion, then you have to be predisposed to sacrifice. And commitment means everything, not something, not convenient, not any excuses. And so to live at the precipice, the point of the pyramid, you have to understand as you ascend, a lot of things have to be put to the left and to the right. So you're not the only one that's sacrificing. As you grow older, your family, your children, there's a lot of sacrifice to be had by everybody.
Mike, you used some very emotive words: sacrifice, excellence, time, commitment. When you think of the traits of a great leader, and indeed the way that you go about leading, what is it you find most challenging in that role?
It's always going to be energy levels first. There's absolute nonsense out there saying that when a coach selects players, that the players motivate themselves and they're highly motivated people. That's nonsense. All right. Because the grind of playing, say, 90 games, and then you're spending 180 days in a plane and you're going somewhere across time zones. The point is very, very simple, is that you're going to have to be on a pinpoint laser-like mission to get that job done if you're going to be a champion. I've experienced being a part of a world champion. All right. And if you say, hey, what did that take? It took an all-out commitment from everybody, not just somebody. And obviously there's a degree of fortune, meaning injury, in that endeavor. But when you live that life and you experience that life and you reflect on that life, you understand the dynamics of what that sacrifice took in order to get there, to give yourself an opportunity. And when failure visits you, and it will frequently do that, you have to change your mindset and say, what did I learn? Not that I lost. Because when you put yourself in a state of learning, regardless of somebody firing you or whatever, you just keep going to the next touchstone. There's no such thing as discouragement, exactly as Kobe Bryant explained. I don't think about failure. I think about opportunity, and I think about learning. So yeah, I might not get the result I want, but at the same time, my notebook is full of lessons learned. That's the beauty of having strived to be the best in the world and losing. I think it's a beautiful opportunity. And like when LeBron said, I don't know if I can do this again, fail like this and go all the way to the championship, game 7, and lose and then break my heart, step on it. And I would say to LeBron, yes, you can. All right. Change your mindset. And he did. And he went again and again and again, and look at him. He's going to turn 41 this year, and what a remarkable athlete. But mentally, it would be tantamount to somebody climbing Everest 30 times. The one time is one thing, but the endurance of the great leader is somebody that is going to take more of an ass whooping than they'll ever.
Franco, which element of leadership do you find most challenging?
I think there's 3 things: the emotional part, the expectation, and then obviously perfection. So the emotional part of things, it does happen that you play so many games in a year to get yourself mentally up is really tough. To maintain that emotion during a game and to not be fazed by other people's emotions, people's influence, the spectators' influence, coaches' influence. It's sometimes hard. Most of the players that I've worked with are internationals as well. So the expectation around performing every week, unfortunately, if they're not educated in that, they fall short. And that leads to the immediate energy levels that drop. Like Mike said, immediately the energy goes down when the emotion is not up there. There's a big management part there. How do you get the emotions ready and right at the right chance? Is it at the right time? Is it too early in the week sometimes? How do you build that emotional component so that you get a top performant athlete day of the game? In my world, I work with different characters, different size, different roles, different positions, and a lot more contact-driven sport to get people to be aggressive at the right time, to be calm at the right time. I think is one of the bigger challenges, to not look at the scoreboard when the scoreboard's down, to act rather on what they want, think too much on the outcomes going to lead to. So I think to control the athlete's emotion is quite something that I've invested time in, to see if I can, across this 15-man game, that's 60 players in the squad, with 15 at one stage on the field, with another 8 players coming in, how do I balance that emotion to make sure that everybody produces and understands at the right time what's expected? And then that comes to the expectation part. Every player has got his own expectation. And sometimes with success also comes expectation around the team, which influence the emotion of the team. They do not want to disappoint, especially if you have a high care environment. If your high care environment is the only negative about that, or the biggest negative of that, is the fact that the players do not want to disappoint. So they end up not acting on what they believe in. Instead, they're afraid of making mistakes. So that expectation of excellence over perfection, I think once you as a coach are well drilled, well organized, and very detailed, sometimes players come so much into your mind that they do not want to make a mistake. And then they strive to be perfect instead of excellent. Excellence for me is just as important as any of these components mentioned. Rather excellence, maximum effort the whole time, than perfection where there's an immediate disappointed feeling if you don't get success from it.
I think it's so true, Franco. I come at life from a different angle than you guys. I'm a CEO, but I know that the search for perfection just destroys people. It makes them work too hard. It zaps their energy, and it's an endless quest. It's almost unattainable. The marginal effort required to achieve it is just often not worth it. Can I go from this idea of what you stand for as a leader, what your challenges are, to the way that you teach leadership, the way that you encourage leadership in others? But I'm going to somewhat controversially bring Anson Dorrance into the conversation. Anson is a famous soccer coach. He's American. He won the World Cup in the early 90s. What's very interesting is that at one stage in the Euros, a third of the coaches had been through his program in America. So he's highly influential, especially when it comes to producing other leaders. But this is what I'd like to share before I ask the question.
And I'm not one of these people that genuinely thinks you can actually teach leadership. In fact, even though I do a lot of leadership speaking, I always let the people know that have hired me to speak in some leadership conference that, you know what, please know if someone in the crowd asks me, Anson, you think you can teach leadership? I'm going to still cash your check, but I'm going to say no, because I've been trying to teach leadership for every year I've been coaching, and I don't think I've succeeded. I think what I've discovered is this person can lead and this person can't. And I've put all these people in different positions to see if they could lead. And even though I've been desperate to try to teach something about leadership, I think all that I've really done is I've put them in these positions and they've succeeded. And I've said, good, okay, well done. And I don't think I can teach leadership. And I question whether anyone actually can. But the teams that I've had that have been incredibly successful have been incredibly well led. And I think it's because of these extraordinary people that I've recruited or selected to lead the teams. And then I've watched them do it. And trust me, I work myself to death to teach leadership. And here's the way I would convince myself that I can teach leadership. If everyone I teach, or the majority of them, becomes a good leader. But I can't testify to that. I can't testify to you right now that the majority of the people that I've tried to help become good leaders have become good leaders.
It's somewhat controversial, which is why I wanted to bring it in. It's controversial in my mind anyway, but I'd be keen to hear how you both react to that. Perhaps, Mike, if I could start with you and then go to Franco.
Oh, you are a twisted man. I would simply say I totally disagree. If you want to talk about the ingredients of leadership, and let's say you're involved in the evolution of leadership, peer pressure as a form of leadership is amazing. Malcolm Gladwell talks about this in his first 100 pages of The Tipping Point. And really all of that, the summation of what he was saying is that environment can influence individuals. Now, if your definition is nimble and a person goes from being an introvert and he's in charge of a small group, or she is, and they never step forward, but if you nurture that and they step forward, of course they may not be the alpha leader, but they have moved their needle to be a better leader for themselves. And yet my tone of voice is very aggressive, and there's a presence by that voice and how I walk into a room, but she or he may never have that. I think it's a rigid definition. I think you've got to be more flexible in saying what you want from each person. I don't care how big the team is or how small the team is. And I think there's leadership within everybody, but the needle's going to move a little bit different for each individual. And if you're in a rush or don't have a lot of time and you've got to assemble a team like the NBA and you have a small or a tight window, then of course you're going to go to the more alpha-like human beings and shape that. But it's like Pele said in Captain's Class, written by a guy named Walker, and he studied the 5 dynasties. His criteria was so difficult. But anyway, Pele was involved in that, and he asked them the pregnant question, why have you never been the captain? And Pele said, I lead from the rear. And if there was ever a leader in sport, it was Pele, but he didn't want to have that patch on his chest for his own reasons, the media being one of them, and he thought he could be more powerful from the flank. So I think we have to be really, really careful in broad stroking this thing on leadership. Yes, we need a compass, but at the same time, we have to be just as nimble. So I'll leave it there for now.
And Franco, what's your reaction to Anson's somewhat controversial stance?
No, I'm actually quite in agreement in what he says. You know, I'm also a person that I'm directive and not prescriptive. Like I mentioned before, I try and create an environment. Obviously, I've got all these mini groups in my team with various responsibilities. All those leaders have different characteristics. They have different, I can't point out exactly before the start of a season, before I get to know the group, exactly who's going to come to the fore from that perspective. But within the group, those players naturally step up. They take responsibility. They handle criticism better. They are people that take initiative. And most of those leaders do not want to speak in front of other people. If the question goes to the larger group, they don't even stand up to answer that. But in a safe environment where they are in control of the knowledge and the understanding of what's expected, and they are confident in their own ability, they use the direction that's given to their own advantage, and they influence the people around them from that perspective. So sometimes it's not only by words or by action, but mostly it's by just understanding what's expected and communicating that at the right time. So I definitely think if you create the right environment, player leadership and individual leadership traits, they just grow so much quicker if they are embraced and if they're in the right environment. I think, therefore, not all leaders will shine in all aspects of life. I think there is certain environments and certain groups of men or women where they will feel comfortable in, where they will step up as leaders and embrace the directive that was given to them. And then you get the people that really embrace the challenge. They know how to control the expectation, the emotion around that, and then they influence a wider group. And therefore, the growth in leadership then starts once they've embraced all the challenges and they've understood what's expected. I think the culture and the values of the group is agreed upon and they buy into that. I think their own character changes and they embrace the natural leadership that everyone has, I believe.
Franco, I hear so many people talk about the loneliness of leadership. I have to admit, it's not something that I experience, but I do hear it spoken about a lot. I'd like to ask you whether or not you experience this loneliness, and if you do, what routines you have in place to cope with it.
Yeah, look, I've been an assistant coach before, so I think Mike's been in the same position where your contribution is different. You have somebody that stands in front of the fire line and you have to make his hands as strong as possible. Being the leader, being the head coach, or being the guy in front of the television, let's say, as the last word, or being challenged from the outside world into quality of performance or the lack of performance, you can find yourself alone. I prefer that. I keep enough distance between me and my coaching group so that we can remain honest with each other and not necessarily become so close and friendly with each other that we can't say it the way it is to make sure that it's performance enhancing. So that makes it sometimes alone. I lived a little bit now the last 3 years. Most of the time I lived alone here. My wife looked after my daughter who was finishing school in South Africa, and my son's obviously already left the house. I appreciated being lonely when we lost, and I wanted to sort it out myself. I don't necessarily need to discuss anything with somebody else until I found that I worked hard enough and for getting clarification on what needs to be done and what's the next thing. But when we won, that is when I miss company or miss support the most. You have to walk away from that. I don't associate immediately after a win with the players. I allow them to get the joy. I think most coaches do. We step away into the background to share the same joy, one thing, but you do feel the next task with the next challenge right around the corner. You don't share all the joys of a top performance. I appreciate, obviously, the fact that the buck stops with you. My coaches know that. I take full responsibility for the performance as long as we agree that we work together on this and they have a good understanding of what the outcome from my perspective. So, I don't mind the loneliness of it, but I feel if it goes wrong, you might sometimes stand in front of just a little story from my own experience. When I started coaching Italy in 2020, just after the World Cup of 2019, there was a big turnover of players. Most of them stopped playing in Italy after the World Cup. The two franchises that producing the players weren't really focused on Italian player developing. They were more focused on their own performance. Very few Italian players at that stage with any experience available. So I had to basically start with a group of under 21 players. I've picked 13 under 21s in the 2021 Six Nations, and you can't build a team an international arena. It was really tough standing in front of the television camera, top competition in the world, the Six Nations, and you are asked difficult questions on the performance of the team where the main reason you have no control over. In a national environment, you pick the best of the best and you choose right. That's where you get it wrong. In my case, they didn't have much to choose from. The young players, I know the route we can put them on, but at that moment, the world demands a result and it demands excellence. And, that's a lonely world. Nobody wants to really be associated with somebody that has a story, has an explanation every time they ask him, why are they not the performance? Or why are there not any results? So, yes, I can associate with being alone at it, but that's what leaders do. We stand at the top, we stand at the front, we make sure that we influence those people, that natural support is there, and you feel alone in front as much as you allow yourself to be alone.
Finding ways to be financially savvy is a smart move. And knowing you could be saving money for the things you really want, like that dream home or new ride, is a great feeling. That's why the State Farm Personal Price Plan can help you save when you choose to bundle home and auto. Bundling, just another way to save with the Personal Price Plan. Prices are based on rating plans that vary by state. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability, amount of discounts and savings, and eligibility vary by state.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Franco. Mike, can I get your reaction to this question around loneliness connected to leadership and how you cope with it?
There's no question. You have to make difficult decisions. Who to cut, who to keep. That's a category. You have all these boxes. And if you have a blood that courses through your veins, you're impacting somebody when you let them go. And, that there's a ripple effect. And if you lose that understanding and that compassion, then you are awash with becoming, a sociopath, my way or the highway, and all these decisions that have to be made in that one role. Those decisions, the buck stops with you. And part of that process is understanding how to be with the national press or in Madison Square Garden or wherever, and you've got 25 media people around you, and all that goes to YouTube, all that goes to Australia, it goes to New Zealand, it goes all over the world within a nanosecond. And somebody's asking you a difficult question about why your team didn't perform. And you've got to bring all of that back to your heart. If you're a good leader, you're going to start with absolute accountability in yourself. And now when juxtaposition comes your way and it's success, you have to know how to move the trophy quickly from somebody that wants to hand it to you and gross adulation and move it to your players and your committee and your owner and all of those things, and be adroit to step into the shadows and understand that's grace and humility. And that wears well over time. That's the endurance of being a coach for 46 years. That's how long I've been doing this. And my point is, those are lessons learned. And so the loneliness can be about the difficult decisions that you have to make as a leader, and they're going to come. And, at some point in time, you can only get so much input, and you got to make the call. And they're not all going to be right, but they're also going to be difficult decisions. The chair is hot, and it'll be tantamount to being a father. All right. You have children, you're going to make some rules, and you have to have follow through in order for those children to go from tiny and little problems, big problems later on if you don't address it. And so my point is the same with your team. And so part of that culture, the drive, the river that runs through it, is establishing a time. Time is a very important thing. And as sure as we're sitting here, your star players, the better players, are going to touch the line on time. All right. And you have to have a strategy that's fair and firm and consequences for actions. And it has to be thought out. So all of those back to the driver of lonely are, going to have to be made strong, and you're going to have to make them ultimately, even though your communication is good with your owner and whatnot, they expect for you to be the lightning rod. They don't want to make those decisions because ultimately, if they don't work out, they're going to let you go. And you haven't been a coach or you haven't been a leader unless you've been fired. All right. And the longer you're in any business, the chances of you making it through without being let go are slim and none. Not if you're elite. If you're elite, here's a book right here that talks about that. This man can coach, and he's one of the best. And it's a book on quiet leadership. It's a beautiful story, but he was let go quite a few times, and he's a stud, and he really knows what he's doing. But he's at the elite level where they get rid of coaches for coughing sideways. So, and it's all about the trophy. And so whether it's Arteta or whomever, Eddie Jones had to transition and get rid of old and bring in young in Australia or in Japan, where he's now. But my point is, it's a click of the fingers, and it's timing. It's a lot of things. But when you do get let go, you have to walk tall, and you have to say to yourself, what did I learn? And you have to be classy about taking on all those things that might not have been your fault. That's lonely. You know that there's a lot of factors that lead to that.
Does that resonate with you, Franco?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's always when we win, it's the players, and if you lose, it's the coach. You must accept.
And Carlos says that in his book, just like that. You know, and he understands that. And, he was best friends with one of the owners, and he was a star player, and he professed his love. And then over a dinner, you got to go, and then because he's known as a player's coach. And he said, that's why I'm hiring you. And he said, you're not tough enough as the players. And that was our final words as he's firing them, and it was all about the trophy. The rest of it is nonsense. And that's why you have to stand tall on your beliefs. You believe time's important. You're willing to go down with those beliefs in your pocket. You'll never regret it. It's when you move your value-based system to the left and sell your soul to the devil because you want to hang on one more year that you're going to bleed. You're going to gut bleed for the rest of your life. You're going to rue that day where you throw your values away to keep the chair. They asked me when I was the head coach at Charlotte to fire 2 assistant coaches. I refused to do it. And they said, do you understand that we are going to let you go because you will not fire these 2 assistants? I said, absolutely, I know. But I said, that will not be on my epitaph. You don't get to decide that. I said, I will not be that man. I said, I'll coach somewhere else. Shook hands, and that was the day of reckoning. But it was fine.
There's something powerful in there, isn't there, about being the captain of your own ship, taking charge of that conversation.
We're always the captain of our own ship, and that is leadership. That's absolute accountability. When you're accountable for your values and your family, and let's say that you're a faith-driven man, all right, and we all are, it may be a different God, but my point to you is you hold those in your hand, and when your father and your mother say your last name is sacred, you're not only there to protect it as a son, but you're expected to take the flag up higher the mountain, and it's the attempt. It's not how high you get the flag. It's the fact that you're willing to carry it when you have incoming. And that's when you find out who you are. If we want to get serious about this topic of leadership, all right, you're going to have a lot of scars by the time you're done on the things that you believe in, be it coaching, your development, or ultimately, like Franco said, is what's your imprint? What's your legacy? What are you leaving your children and your wife? If there's something more important than that, I don't know what that is. I want them to be proud of me. I want the players to be proud of me, but I'm not going to negotiate with them on certain aspects that I know are tried and true for my life. I want to win as bad as anybody, but my point is that I'm not giving those away.
Yeah. Well, I want to just add to that is that my philosophy is doing the right thing is always the right thing to do. And the players by now know that, they know that I care, but I'm also going to stick to what the script says. And that is important. I think once people establish that you're honest what you try and do, you work hard. I don't believe in hard work. I believe in very hard work. It doesn't help the players shy away from that. I see the players here that, the only way you're going to turn your water into wine is by filling the casks. And I think sometimes that hard work, the pressure to be the best version of yourself every day might get to them. And I think that's where I feel my leadership is important, is to stay authentic, to stay the person that they know. Win or lose doesn't faze me. I stay out to track. I keep on changing the team up. I keep on reaching the goals, and I keep on staying true to my word. If that means a little bit of a vacation for 2 weeks, even regardless of the stick to that principle. And so I don't commit too easily on it. But once I've committed, my word's my word. And I think they can hold me, I can hold them then responsible for their word in the way, I stay true to my north.
And I will say this, Paul, part of that authenticity is the care factor for your players. They're all going to be vulnerable. They're all going to get sick. They're all going to get hurt. And so I'm in the training room. My follow-up about somebody's birthday, their child, their whatever is I'm in full tilt and interested. And they know that when they become vulnerable, and that's why I was an assistant almost half of my career, all right, that I move like a cobra in on vulnerability because they're all going to have it. And so you better be on red alert and be ready to move in when they are vulnerable, because that is the ultimate test of a leader. Yeah, we want victory. Yeah, we want championships. That's why we're there. But what will carry the day is love. No question about it. And what will carry the day is that you're sitting in the training room while they're getting taped up and they snap their ankle and you tell them, hey, you did this and this, and he can't get out on the paddock, and you know it. And you say, hey, man, I just think you're incredible. All right, I'm going to go out there and do my job, but I'm thinking of you. All right, I understand that. And I said, just so you know, we're going to grab a bite to eat. I'm coming off that paddock. We're going to do film. But at 5 o'clock, we're going to get something to eat. We're going to have a good one. And I said, I'm with you. And that player will go to 4 others and talk to them about that love. And if you display that, regardless of result, you're going to be smiling, and that's when people understand you're a dangerous man, because you do live up to your convictions and your care factor was elite.
Finding ways to be financially savvy is a smart move. And knowing you could be saving money for the things you really want, like that dream home or new ride, is a great feeling. That's why the State Farm Personal Price Plan can help you save when you choose to bundle home and auto. Bundling, just another way to save with the Personal Price Plan. Prices are based on rating plans that vary by state. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability, amount of discounts and savings, and eligibility vary by state.
I started this podcast 5 years ago. At the time, I was running a business, and I remember thinking through a moment, watching my daughter do a TikTok dance, which is a story for another day. What do I actually know about leadership? Which sort of set me on this journey of interviewing what I thought at the time would be 6 great coaches who are the best leaders I've experienced. There's something about their selflessness and stoicism that just really connects with me. But the reason I bring that up is because the number one thing I've learnt is the power of care. Now, if you'd asked me my top 10 leadership words prior to starting this, care would not have been in the top 10. And I say that quite openly as someone that came from the corporate world. Leadership is about the allocation of scarce resources. It's about long-term goals. We will build a factory on this site in 5 years. It was never or didn't have care truly at the heart at its premise. And I think it's the biggest learning that I've had. So listening to you both talk about it so passionately, I'm just reminded again of the power of care when it comes to leadership. And I think this is a trend that is sweeping more into the mainstream. Certainly in Australia it is too. We look to our leaders to care. We look to them to want to express a level of empathy with the situation, but also have a vision for that future. On that note, on my soliloquy, I would like to both ask you one final question, if I could, before we wrap up. And I would like to start with you, if I could, Franco. If I get you to cast your mind back over the journey, is there a particular piece of advice or story that was shared with you by someone that had an impact on you when it came to your approach to leadership? And then, Mike, I'll ask the same question to you.
I'll have to think a little bit about that one. So, Michael, if you have a specific story, you must fire away.
Joan McDermott got let go 2 weeks ago, our athletic director. No reason given, a wheel employee. And I've called her every day since. She had a birthday. My wife and I, Molly, took her and her husband out to dinner. We won a couple national championships together. She was my boss at a previous institution. And so what I understood about her was that's not a fun experience for her. And so stay close when things are bad. You find out what people are about, obviously, when things don't go their way, all right, or your way. Second, when you're under pressure and immense pressure, what's your behavior going to be like, especially when things aren't going your way? And then finally, I had a buddy of mine who was in law school at McGeorge Law School in Northern California. He graduated from Dartmouth. He was captain of the hockey team and the baseball team. So he had some elements of leadership. I'll leave it there. He ran in the American River 50, and he called me up. And I had no idea he was going to run in this race. You had the bar to take a month after this. And at mile 46, he stove up. And it was the type of race where they had to send in donkeys to get him out of there and then put him in a helicopter and get him to the hospital. He was dehydrated he was in a danger zone. And so he called me up and told me about that. And I was just finished college, and I was a young assistant. And I started laughing. We grew up together. We played on the same baseball team, basketball team, football team, all of that. Came from a small town. So anyway, I just started cracking up, and I'm going, Brent, what are you doing? And he said, well, you can't do that. And I go, dude, 6-pack of beer, I can run 50 miles. So anyway, I went up there a year later and ran in that thing, finished it, got him on the phone and said, you owe me a 6-pack. And I finished the 50 miles, and I'm sitting down on a sidewalk, and there are these people conversing, and they'd run in the race too, and they're happy as Larry. And I go, what, where do you people come from? And they go, hey, this is just a precursor for the Western States 100 through the Sierra Nevadas. And I'm going, what? There's a 100-mile race? I'd never heard of a thing. I was not that kind of a runner. And I was intrigued. So anyway, I started training. And ultimately, I ran in that 100-mile race and finished the race. And I finished it in less than 24 hours. You get a silver belt buckle. But in the pursuit of running 100 miles, I'm a visitor. I'm not that guy. I wanted to test myself to see if I could do something that was extraordinary for somebody that wasn't that. And I changed jobs. I went from the University of Southern California as an assistant. All my friends said, don't do it. And I needed to learn how to coach. And I was inside at 29, and I had all these notes. So I went to a Division III school to learn my trade. And my point is that I ran in this 100 miles, so I wasn't prepared. I was on the course to train properly, but then for a month, I had to assemble, a team and whatever you do to take over a new job. And my point of that in finishing that was that might be the greatest physical endeavor that I ever put myself through. And the things that I learned that David Goggins talks about, the greatest endurance runner, arguably, in the history of mankind, he's certainly one of those top 10 guys. And lessons learned at mile 70 to mile 100 were absolutely luminous and transparent, and they've led me the entire time. And whether it's mental, physical, emotional, or spiritual, I think every individual needs to put themselves under the gun to find out who they really are. It does not have to be physical, but you have to put yourself in juxtaposition to really define yourself, to find out who you really are. And in that race, that was a threshold moment for the rest of my life. And I knew once I ran that race that I could do anything, absolutely anything. And I was a kid from a town of 30,000 and ended up working for Michael Jordan in Fairbanks, Alaska, the northernmost reaches of the world, and no support, no nothing to come out of that hole, all right, to work for Michael Jordan as a head coach in the NBA. And there are only 30 of those chairs. And my thing is, no, not woe, me, whatever. I realized my support were my grade school teachers, my junior high teachers, my high school teachers, my college teachers. I had support my whole life. I just didn't know it. And the realization of running that race was I was gifted with education in understanding how to articulate this at this moment with you and Franco, who is brilliant, by the way, and to put it on the head of the needle. And what I'm saying to you is my story is not my story. It's my father's story. It's my grandfather's story. But I'm lucky.
You're always a tough act to follow, Mike. You speak so eloquently and with such passion and wisdom. But Franco, is there a reaction or a counter story or a point that you could leave us with?
Now, look, I think my biggest the story that I'll tell is all about staying humble. I think that is the big thing with success. I've won a lot of rugby games. I've won a lot of trophies as a player and as a coach. And, you sometimes think, but why me? And, I've got a good friend from the West Asian who died of MS. He was a legendary Springbok rugby player. And he got ill when he was 45 years old, way too early. Well, but he's brilliant. And I think if you Google him, you'll find a lot more on his story. But we one day played together, and I remember he made a tackle and I collected the ball from somebody else and scored a try. And as I ran back, I could hear the crowd go, Franco, Franco. And I was really on top of the world. Your feet only touch now and then. And he came next to me and said, why don't you hand the ball back to me? I was in a better position to score. And I think on the back of that, he also said to me, always remember your friends on the way up because you're going to need them when you come down. Staying humble, staying true to your task is maybe the leadership trait that I embrace most. It's not about winning. We learn the best lessons when we do it. Other way around, I don't shout and scream and hit the floor if we lose, because I know exactly how the players feel when they do not get it right. But rather, when you're on top of your game, when you think you are really good at what you do, then rather stay humble and start at the bottom again, empty the cupboards, do the spring clean and try and do it again. And I have a saying that I've plastered up the wall in my office that says complacency has no smell or taste. It doesn't leave footprints, but it's always present. And I think that is important to understand, that your nearest loss is after the previous win. So stay humble, stay appreciative of why you do the job. And I think that is the important thing for me. I know exactly why I do this, and I know the players or the people in different countries. I worked in Italy, South Africa, and here in Scotland with the various cultures, with very different people, a lot of Australians, even a couple of Americans I've worked with, Maoris, I've worked with Aborigines, I've worked with South Africans, Scottish people, Italians. Different culture, different characteristics, different way of do. One thing that stays true, all of them wants to be successful, but needs to climb the ladder, and they must know what I stand for. And I think that is being humble, being the best version of yourself every day.
Franco, Mike, it's a privilege for me to spend this hour with you both this morning. So much wisdom in your journeys, and their global journeys, I think, too. So you've been exposed to more of the human race than most people. But I thank you very much for your time today, and I very much look forward to sharing this with the rest.
Thank you, Franco. I appreciate you, Paul. You take care.
Thanks for the chat. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. You have been listening to our episode on leadership with the great coaches Mike Dunlap and Franco Smith. I hope you found Mike and Franco's stories illuminating and took away a couple of ideas that you can bring back to your own teams or family for discussion. When I listened back, some of the highlights for me were Mike's view that the loneliness of leadership comes from the decisions that you have to make, and the corresponding need to accept that they are not always going to be right. Which led me to the question, how do you mitigate the loneliness you might feel as a leader? Franco's philosophy as a leader, that the right thing is always the right thing to do. It made me reflect on what philosophy guides me as a leader, and how Franco focuses on three key things to lead effectively. The first is the emotional reaction of the team, the second is realistic expectations, and the third is excellence over perfection. And then lastly, Mike's view that the most powerful thing that you can do is lead by example. And this is a critical step on the journey of excellence. Which led me to the question of, what had I done today to lead by example? I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. And if those questions are helpful for you, I'll put them in the show notes. And just before we go, if you have any feedback, then please let us know. Just like Rose, who, after listening to our episode with Gilbert Enoka, said, "Great session, I learned so much." Thanks, Rose. We love the interaction with the people around the world who listen. And so if you have any feedback or comments, please let us know. In fact, if we could ask anything of you, it would be to forward this episode onto one person in your network who's interested in developing their own leadership skills. But if you do have any feedback, please let us know. All the details on how to connect with us are in the show notes or on our website, thegreatcoachespodcast.com.
Business is booming, but you know what really helped? Xero, the accounting platform for small businesses. I used to think spreadsheets were just part of it. Ugh. But real-time cash flow? Wow. Invoices that chase themselves? Even better. Books that automate? That's a big one. And I can keep track from my phone while I get the job done. No spreadsheet in sight. What a life. Do right by yourself and your business and search Xero for your free trial. Conditions apply.
Finding ways to be financially savvy is a smart move. And knowing you could be saving money for the things you really want, like that dream home or new ride, is a great feeling. That's why the State Farm Personal Price Plan can help you save when you choose to bundle home and auto. Bundling, just another way to save with the Personal Price Plan. Prices are based on rating plans that vary by state. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability, amount of discounts and savings, and eligibility vary by state.